Fair and just.
We have a guy here in Cleveland, Tim Misney, who his tagline is, "I'll make them pay." And then at the bottom it says, does not mean he'll make them pay. This is not.
Please take a screenshot of that.
It doesn't say that. It says like, this does not indicate, monetary
that I will actually make them pay.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'll make them pay.
I'm excited today. We're trying something out that we haven't done. I think I may have done it once before, but we haven't done it in a long time anyway. And it's pre-recorded interview. So our main topic will be a discussion of technology in China and trying to bust some stereotypes about it with Eric Olander, who is a longtime China watcher, lives in Shanghai, is from the United States though, gets back here regularly. And the time difference made it so that having him living in Shanghai, having him on during this is like super early in the morning, right? It'd be the middle of the night for him. So we pre-recorded the interview yesterday afternoon, and we're going to roll it into the show today. Roger thinks it went well. I think it went well. Sarah thinks it went well. So I think you're going to like it. Hopefully video folks won't be too weirded out that it's not got video, because it was much easier bandwidth wise to just record audio.
That's why during that time period, Tom will be made up as former Vice President Dick Cheney in honor of the Oscars, right?
Oh,
yeah.
All right,
right.
Vice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vice.
I have to say, he really is a chameleon of an actor.
Yeah, he is.
Whether or not you liked Vice, I watched it. I thought it was well done. I'll leave it at that.
Batman.
But he can transform in ways that a lot of other actors cannot.
And what if he's
right now?
It'd be great if he slipped
He's me.
If he could slip into Batman while he's doing Cheney, that would be great.
He can't do that anymore. He's hitting the wall.
I think it depends on who you'd ask whether that would be great or not. Yeah.
All right. So when we get done with the pre-recorded, there'll be an obvious ending, Sarah, where I'll say thanks again, Eric. Yep. and then just jump right into and thanks to all those who participated in our subreddit.
Gotcha. Oh, I gotcha. I really hope Bohemian Rhapsody doesn't win Best Picture.
Oh, I don't think it will. I think Green Book is the best chance to upset Roma. I don't think Bohemian's going to get it. Maybe Star is Born has an outside shot, but not Bohemian Rhapsody. Don't you worry.
Well, I'm not worried. These things are out of my control, but I'm just saying, I think Roma is the best movie of the last year, by far.
It should get director, and it should get Best Picture.
Mm-hmm. Cinematography, perhaps.
Potentially screenplay, though I might fall for the if we're not going to give Spike Lee director, let's give him screenplay. So.
Oh yeah, right.
I think that might happen. But yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, you guys ready to break for some tech news?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2. Melissa Worster has supported independent tech news directly for 5 years. Be like Melissa. Be Lissa. Become a DTNS member at patreon.com/DTNS. This is the Daily Tech News for Friday, February 22nd, 2019 in Los Angeles. I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline, I'm Sarah Lane.
From my home studio in Cleveland, Ohio, I'm Len Peralta.
And I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
I was tempted to say snowy Los Angeles because there technically was snow in the city of Los Angeles yesterday.
Yeah.
I did see a photo from your roof that there was no snow.
There was no snow on my roof, though.
Yeah, mine either. But it was very cold this morning, but no snow.
No snow. No snow in Cleveland either, though. That's something Cleveland and LA have in common.
Yes, it's beautiful here.
Or at least my area of LA. I guess we don't because part of it, never mind. Hey, today we have a special interview with Eric Olander, who will join us to talk about technology in China. He's the co-host of the weekly China and Africa podcast that explores every facet of the PRC's engagement on the continent. I'll be talking to him in a few minutes, but first, let's start with some tech things you should know.
Baidu beat analysts' expectations for revenue and profit. Revenue from its streaming video service, iQIYI, rose 55%, offsetting lower ad sales on search and also news. Baidu plans to expand its AI offerings like smart speakers and autonomous driving to enterprise and government customers. While revenue rose 10%, it was the slowest growth in 6 quarters. So a rise, but also a fall.
So quick. MacRumors reports Apple plans to close its retail stores in Plano and Frisco, Texas on April 12th. Both stores are located in the Eastern Texas District Court region. That is that region that you might know as being famous for kind of being friendly to patent holders. A new Apple store will open in the nearby Galleria Dallas shopping mall April 13th. The mall is just outside of the Eastern District's jurisdiction, but fairly close to Frisco and Plano. So the Frisco and Plano folks can still go to the Apple store, but without Apple operating in the Eastern District. And this could prevent cases from being brought to the Eastern District on the basis of Apple having an established place of business within there. Region.
Oh, man. Facebook is removing its Onavo VPN app from the Google Play Store. The VPN service will continue to work for existing users, but will eventually be shut down. Facebook used data from the app's users to conduct market research, but it has stopped that practice. Also, the company has also stopped recruiting new users of the Facebook Research app for Android. Now, if you're wondering, what about the iOS versions of all of this? The iOS versions of both apps were banned by Apple.
So that's Facebook stopping its own data collection. Sarah, right. Let's talk about them dealing with other people, sending them data.
Oh, let's. The Wall Street Journal reports that it found 11 health-related iOS apps that share info with Facebook, even if the user of the app has no Facebook account. Now, this is important. It's not necessarily Facebook's fault here. The apps track things like ovulation, or your weight, or your heart rate, and then they share that data. None of the apps appear to have an option to stop the data sharing, even if you would have known about it and you would have wanted it. The apps use a Facebook analytics tool called App Events that can target ads by event. The Facebook App Events tool advises developers not to share health or financial information or other categories of sensitive information. So, the company told the Wall Street Journal that some of the practices discovered seem to violate terms, and it will force those apps to stop sharing the data.
So I've already seen people taking Facebook to task for this because that's the reaction, right?
Yeah, Facebook's at it again. They're stealing our data.
I would argue this is exactly what happened with Cambridge Analytica, where someone violated the terms of service without Facebook's knowledge. What was different about that is the question of, wait, when did Facebook know they were violating it and what did they do about it? That's what's got people legitimately angry. This, It sounds like Facebook, I mean, we could maybe try to find out if they knew about this earlier, but it sounds like now that it's public, they immediately clamp down on it. They've learned their lesson there. These apps, on the other hand, should not have been collecting this data and sending it to this analytics app without disclosing that. It's anonymized for the most part, but you should know. You should be allowed to decide not to use this app because of that. And you should probably be able to opt in, not opt out of that.
Absolutely. And I also think that Facebook has a user trust issue to the point where even if the company says, don't worry, we're not collecting your monthly cycle information or your social security information or whatever, I think that there are a lot of users who are like, we just don't believe that. Yeah. I mean, maybe you're not doing anything with it, but you're probably not throwing it out.
Now, Facebook's even saying like, look, we didn't want them to send it. We don't want them to continue to send it. And we're going to stop them from sending it. And people are like, yeah, but you're still Facebook and I'm mad at you. So yeah,
exactly.
NVIDIA introduced the GeForce GTX 1660 Ti graphics card based on its Turing architecture, not the Pascal architecture. Unlike NVIDIA's RTX cards, the 1660 Ti doesn't include DLSS or ray tracing support, but then a lot of games don't either. So this may not be a big deal for some of you if you want to save the money. It does promise power efficient performance for 120 frames per second gameplay at 1080p. It's got 6 gigabytes of RAM. Pretty good specs. NVIDIA says it's about 1.5 times faster than the GTX 1060. The GTX 1660 Ti is available worldwide for $279. Roger, I know you keep abreast of this sort of stuff. How does this one strike you? It's a good price.
It's they're trying to hit a market that was sorely missing when all the video cards were being snatched up by cryptocurrency miners. There wasn't a performance but low cost card that they had in the lineup, but AMD did. And so I think they're trying to fill in that gap. And you're right, ray tracing support and DLSS isn't in a majority of games. So there's no benefit for gamers to buy it right now and not really have, like some would say, like, yeah, you're just sitting on $100 that's burning a hole in your pocket because you're not seeing the benefit. So this would be a good move if they can fill the channels and make it so that you can buy it without having to resort to eBay or resellers who are trying to make a quick buck by buying a huge cache of these and reselling them. It could go a long way to help NVIDIA be more competitive in that kind of value category.
When we were talking to Patrick Norton about the video card market a little while ago, he was hoping to have heard something about this card at the time. So this is the other shoe dropping on that. And it's something when you're building a machine yourself, which I know a few of you do, not as many as they used to. This is a good option to have out there if, like Roger says, you don't have a ray tracing or a DLSS game that you have to play, or you don't have to have just the most future-proofed possible video card out there. If you're willing to get by with this, it's a good card.
It's a good card, and even if you're not a gamer, you're a content creator, but you rely on Adobe's Creative Cloud, many of their applications support the GPU rendering that's available within a lot of NVIDIA's and AMD's products. So, it's, again, if they can hit that value proposition and fill those channels so you can actually go to the store and buy one and not feel like, you spent $40 more than you had to, it'd be great.
Yeah, good point.
Let's move on to space, shall we? The Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency's Hayabusa 2 spacecraft successfully landed on the near-Earth asteroid Ryugu Friday. It will be the second craft to collect samples from an asteroid and return them to Earth after 2005's Hayabusa, the original. The landing and collection were made more challenging as the surface was made of larger than expected gravel. Sounds like a lot of beaches I've been to. Hayabusa 2 will collect 2 more samples before returning to Earth. NASA's Orisis Rex arrived at asteroid Bennu in December, and that's scheduled to collect samples in 2020.
We're mining asteroids.
Mm-hmm.
We are literally mining asteroids. We're not mining a lot. We don't even know what we're getting until we, 4 years later get the
doing
sample
it.
back.
Yeah.
But yeah, Japan's done it twice now. The United States is about to do it. This is how it starts, right? And the pictures are fascinating. This kind of stuff always fascinates me because it does just look like gravel. Not quite as uniform as you might see, on a gravel driveway or something like that, but it is they are big chunks of rock, and you're like, that's the surface of an asteroid. That's what it looks like.
Well, and I think a lot of folks think of asteroids as like they're rocketing towards Earth to kill us all.
Right.
You can actually land a spacecraft on an asteroid if you do it right. That is kind of mind-boggling.
And I think what's so fascinating is the continued automation of space exploration. Back when the Apollo missions, the idea was you send up a man there, you land them, and they're going to dig with a shovel and bring everything back. If you can do these with robots, there's you basically drop the cost, but you also broaden out the number of missions. Really hard to put a person on a moving asteroid and then return them safely back to the Earth. Very easy to do with a robot.
No, it's a good point. The flexibility is important in the mission execution too. Because they found that this was not like a powdery regolith on the surface, they changed the maneuvers, which could have been impossible with the extra weight of a person, or because they didn't have the time to bring them back alive. If they changed the maneuvering, you don't have that problem when you have a when you have a machine, or at least you have a little more flexibility. Following up on last week's story about the GAN created human faces at thispersondoesnotexist.com, we now have thiscatdoesnotexist.com. And if I've learned anything from looking at thiscatdoesnotexist.com, AI is way better at human faces than it is at making cats.
Oh man, do you speak the truth? You know, it's funny. This person does not exist.com. It really got a lot of attention. People being like, wow. I mean, okay, as we talked about it on a previous show, sometimes there's a hairline thing or sort of a symmetry thing where you're like, doesn't quite seem right. But was for the most part really hard to discern between real and fake. Not the same with felines.
No, not at all.
Every single one of these cats, I was like, that's a weird cat. Like that would be like a cat at the shelter. You're like, something's up with that cat. That's not a real cat.
Almost flip-flopped. I actually went to thispersondoesnotexist.com several times to try to find ones that didn't look right. And eventually I did after enough refreshing. With thiscatdoesnotexist.com, it's almost the opposite. Like you're looking for the cat that looks real. Find one that looks like a real cat.
Yeah, where you're like that's a weird paw. Their eye is weird. Like that's
I just found
which is funny because
version of a cat. Like there's a second cat merged with the cat.
Well, which kind of it ends up being a question of like, okay, are humans are they easily enough to sort of cobble together to the point that we don't know the difference? We're humans. But when it comes to certain animals, and sure, there might be animals that work better than cats, but this is like, no, this doesn't work.
I think it's part of it is a face is a fairly uniform thing, right? It's always fairly oval. It's got two eyes and a nose, right?
Perhaps.
Cat, they're doing the whole body. And that's more complicated. You got more parts there. So maybe
also, I'm sure it has to learn more about cats than than a person.
Why?
Or we're just very asymmetrical. And
I just think they're at the stage where they haven't fed the machine learning enough cats.
I don't know if that. I mean, that'd be interesting to find out. I would assume they've got access to plenty of cat pictures. It is the internet. Like, there's no reason that wouldn't have had enough training.
No, in fact, the internet is actually the place to get all the cat photos.
I think
all I know is these things will haunt me in my dreams.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Me too.
All right, folks. If you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, don't forget dailytechheadlines.com exists just for you. Go get it at dailytechheadlines.com. China. It's very often misunderstood in the world of technology. We do our best on this show to bring you some stories to kind of help you see what's going on there in a different light from what you might hear elsewhere, and to help us understand it even better. Let's welcome Eric Olander, longtime China watcher who currently works in digital marketing in Shanghai. Eric, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you.
It's great to be back, Tom.
Now, let's jump right into this, because I think the biggest thing when people are thinking about China right now, at least in the United States, is the trade war. Is that really affecting consumer tech buying habits in China? How much of what's changing in China is just other economic impacts?
So there's a short answer and a long answer. We'll stick with the short answer for time. The short answer is no, it's not having a dramatic impact, in part because the way that people perceive the trade war here is, I think, very different than it is in the United States, in part because the media here is so filtered through government control and censorship and whatnot. And the government's really trying to kind of keep passions down. That being said, Huawei, of course, is one of the big casualties of the ongoing U.S.-China trade dispute. And in that sense, Chinese consumers are rallying around Huawei in some ways because they feel that the attack from the United States is more political than it is actually on security grounds. So in that sense, there is this kind of, emotional connection to Huawei where people feel a loyalty and a passion for the brand. That being said, Huawei makes great phones. The P20 is an amazing phone, amazing devices. And so consumers are also migrating to brands like Huawei in part because brands like Apple simply aren't catering to the local needs of Chinese consumers. And in this day and age, with a market as big as China's, that's a really, really big risk for a company like Apple. So it has less to do with the trade war and more to do with catering to local consumer needs.
Now, and Samsung's falling into the same thing where Samsung and Apple are playing the parts of Nokia and BlackBerry from years ago right now, if they're not careful. How much of the perception of American companies plays into these things? What is the perception of the Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google within China by the consumers there?
There is no perception of Facebook and
Sure.
Google. I mean, Google left China back in 2010. So 10 years in tech in the US is like 30 years. And in China, it's like 50 years. So it's just not relevant. Most people on the street today have no idea what Google is. I mean, they heard of it as a brand the same way that we've heard about the moon, but I've never been to the moon.
Yeah.
Facebook just doesn't exist. So we have two entirely different operating systems of life. That is, and that's something that's hard for us to understand, that we think that the World Wide Web is truly international. Well, it's really not, because the tools that you use in the United States there in Los Angeles to navigate through your daily life don't work at all here. Your MasterCard, your Visa doesn't always even work here. Your payment systems here don't work because they use WeChat and Alipay. The web is done by Baidu, and all of their time is not even on the web. Web traffic here is actually quite low overall because most of the time people are spending on these super apps like WeChat. And so it's a totally different operating system of life. And so in that sense, the American brands just aren't relevant. Amazon's here, but when Amazon's up against Alibaba, it's insignificant. It's kind of cute. That's the way that people look at it. Nobody talks about Amazon in China, even though it's here, but it's just not even competitive with Alibaba.
Well, that's why they want to merge with the better import brand, right? Because if they're going to have any business, they might as well ride the coattails of somebody else who does their business better than they do, it seems like.
But at the end of the day, for American tech companies in China, it's a long, sad story because this is a very, very difficult market to work in, both because the complexity of the market, but then you have these other factors like the local players like Alibaba. They have a thumb on the scale in the form of the government. The government plays a very, very active role in society here, much more so in the economy than it does in the West and whatnot. And local players oftentimes have an advantage. That being said, Oracle, Microsoft, a lot of these big brands, they're still very, very active here. They make a lot of money here. And the tech space is expanding beyond just pure tech into automotive. Tesla setting up its first factory, its Gigafactory here. So the tech space and the definition of tech is growing. And American companies still are very, very active, but just nowhere near on the scale and size that the Chinese are.
Now let's flip this the other way. I think a lot of people have heard of Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, maybe even ByteDance. Now that TikTok has busted out with the acquisition of Musical.ly. What are our misperceptions of these companies from this side, and what are the big ones that we're not even aware of over here?
So I think the biggest misperception, and it's a 20-year-old misperception, is that the Chinese copy. And that everything is just an equivalent. You see in the news, in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, they'll always say, this Chinese site is the equivalent of this, or this one is the Facebook of China or the Twitter of China. And that's really a misnomer because Weibo, for example, owned by Sina, is not the Twitter of China, just the same way that WeChat is not the Facebook of China. These things may have started early on very, very similar to the way that Steve Jobs copied the icons from, the Xerox PARC, and it looked a little bit like what Windows was doing, but then it morphed out, to unrecognizable from what it started. And that's where we are today, is that these kind of the parallels are not there at all. But what's interesting to me about thinking about Chinese brands is that a lot of consumers in the US probably don't even know they're consuming a Chinese brand. So I'm always surprised when people talk about TikTok and the growth of TikTok, and that it's ByteDance behind it, and Musical.ly as well. And so we're starting to see the arrival of Chinese brands, but in very, very subtle ways. DJI, for example. I thought DJI was from Texas for the longest time, but it's from Shenzhen. And DJI represents a really interesting trend that we're seeing where it's the marriage of not just the low-cost hardware that China was so famous for a long time ago, but now it's the marriage of the low-cost hardware with artificial intelligence, very sophisticated software that goes into it, that brains are going into it. So those Lime scooters that you've got all over Santa Monica and San Francisco everywhere, those are made out of Shenzhen. And it's the combination of that hardware and the software. And that's where China's going next. And we see those Lime scooters all over the place. We never think that that's a Chinese scooter. Sure, people assume that it was manufactured in China, but the software was also built in China as well. And that's really one of the big next steps in innovation.
Now, given what we've been talking about, I think it's clear that it's not impossible, but it's hard for a U.S. company to come into China and be successful. And likewise, it's no cakewalk for a Chinese company to come into the U.S., especially these days when there's some prevailing headwinds trying to push against at least some of them. But there's the middle ground that I want to focus on: India, Africa, South America. What advantages and disadvantages do you think the Chinese tech companies have in these markets?
So let's take a look at Southeast Asia, for example, because Alibaba is making big moves in Southeast Asia. And also Amazon is moving aggressively into India as well. So this is one of the big battlegrounds that we're going to see. One of the key advantages that Alibaba has is that it brings together, obviously, this massive e-commerce platform and all the artificial intelligence, all the big data that goes with that. It brings together logistics as well, and it's got payments wrapped up into it. So through Ant Financial, which is their payments arm, and obviously Alipay and all of that technology and the relationships that Alibaba has with its banks and so forth that process all this in the back end, it brings a full suite of applications into a market like Vietnam or Malaysia or even India. Amazon, for its part, is coming in with an e-commerce platform. It doesn't bring the payment side. It's not necessarily bringing in the logistics side in places like India. And so that makes it much, much more difficult. The second part of it is in the hardware space. So Chinese hardware manufacturers, the Oppos, Vivos, Huawei, Xiaomi, Lenovo's, they have managed to build phones and devices that are specifically made for this market. And really, there's no American equivalent. Apple is not engaging in these lower end markets. They don't want to be in that bottom feeder space. But these Chinese brands, which now are 7 of the top 10 global mobile phone makers by volume, they're really competitive in building phones that are sub $100. And that's bringing the next billion consumers online. So the marriage between a Chinese phone that the Vietnamese consumer is getting on for the first time, mixed then with Lazada, which is backed by Alibaba, and that e-commerce really shows the strength of the Chinese value proposition in places like Southeast Asia. That's replicating in South America, Africa, and a lot of emerging markets.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if a few years down the road, we start to see Reliance Jio or Indian companies or companies coming out of Kenya or Nigeria start to upset the apple cart of the dominant Huawei who's gotten complacent. It'll be very interesting to watch.
It will be, but scale is really important here. Remember, Huawei sold $100 billion of gear last year. It will be very, very difficult to get to that scale, but at the same time, local providers are going to be able to customize services in ways that the big ones can't.
Yeah. One last thing I want to get you to address before we go. You do the China-Africa project, and I wonder if you have anything that people should know about the sub-Saharan African tech scene that you don't think they would have heard of. We've talked about M-Pesa. We talked about the drone delivery in Rwanda. Is there anything else going on there that you're like, people should realize that this is coming. This is the next thing?
Yeah. Africa is one of the most exciting tech markets in the world. It's a continent that is the youngest continent. Median age is 18 years old. The growth of social networking is just huge. Bandwidth is coming in. Huawei Marine is bringing in a new Asia to Africa, a massive trunk line onto the continent. So we're seeing a connectivity boom as well. But on the Chinese side, it's really, really interesting because a third of the entire cell phone market in Africa is controlled by one company. And it's a company you have probably never heard of. Transsion, which makes the Techno brand. And this is a company out of Shenzhen that doesn't even sell here domestically in China. It's selling purely into Africa and Asia, into developing emerging markets. So that's really interesting that one company controls a third of the entire market. Now what Transsion's doing is they're starting to put on a layer of services on top of their hardware. So we're starting to see the arrival of Chinese music services, e-commerce services, and the arrival of Alibaba and Tencent is starting to come on the back of this Chinese hardware that is really now pervasive across the continent. So I think that marriage of the hardware and the e-commerce is going to be what we see in the future.
So how do you spell Transsion?
Transsion is Transsion, and the brand that they have, the phone brand, is Techno, Tecno. So we do a lot of coverage on tech on the China-Africa project. So if you go to ChinaAfricaProject.com and just search for those words, you'll find a bunch of the shows that we've done, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that in the future.
Eric, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And you just mentioned it, but remind people again, where should they go to keep up with what you're doing?
So we produce a weekly podcast on China, all things China, Africa, including tech. And you can find that over on our website at ChinaAfricaProject.com or where you subscribe to all your podcasts. And you can also find me on Twitter at Olander. That's EOLANDER. And I'm tweeting all day about China, Africa issues. And so would love for your audience to join our discussion.
Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you.
Eric, wonderful insight into the Chinese marketplace. And also thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddits. Sometimes there are China stories there, sometimes not, but you can submit stories and vote on others at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. Also on Facebook, if you like Facebook groups, we've got one, facebook.com/groups/dailytechnewsshow.
Let's dive into the email.
Shall we? Kome had some thoughts on our conversation yesterday, Thursday, on Google Glass and whether or not it should be called a failure. And I think there are a lot of different opinions on what that means. Kome says, sure, many cutting-edge products don't succeed financially, but I'm rather interested in using cool products rather than investing in the company's stock. So I appreciate it when a company is gutsy enough to release a brand new product to the market and let us all experience it. Most of us don't have resources to even create a prototype. We rely on big companies to make tremendous efforts to develop and mass produce a product. So I think we should be a little bit more fair when talking about the significance of those products. Many products were a failure of the marketing. For example, they should have labeled Google Glass as a developer kit like Magic Leap did, for example. But it was still a remarkable product of hardware, and we all learned a little bit more about the potential of AR. I think there are enough people who worry about the product's financial success or failure. As a technology lover, I think we can rather focus on the innovation aspects and encourage companies to come up with more products in new categories.
Oh, very well said, Kome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice. All right. Shall we check in with Len Peralta?
Let's check in with Len Peralta. Len, I know you've been drawing up a storm. What you got for us?
Yeah, it was a fascinating discussion about China by our guest. But of course, I had to go back to the cat story. This cat does not exist. Sort of a companion piece from last week, which was this person does not exist. So in this drawing, we have a cat who is being shown off by another cat. And that cat is saying, this cat does not exist, cat. And neither does this cat. Yeah.
So. The cat on the stool is a transporter accident of a cat with 3 heads. The cool cat pointing him out is just a cool guy.
Yeah.
He's a cool cat.
He's a cool cat. And he doesn't exist either. None of these cats exist. Cat.
Now this is going to make me want to force this dog does not exist into the conversation next week so we can get a triptych from you.
That's next, right?
Yeah.
Next week. Come on, internet. Let's go. This dog does not exist. But this print you can get right now at lenperaltstore.com, along with all the last 4 or 5 years of DTNS drawings. They're all there. You can pick them up today at lenperaltstore.com.
Our goal each month is to get one more patron than last month. We need 6 of you, just 6 of you. If you are a person who makes up one of a potential 6 people who likes the show and isn't backing it yet, become a member. Patreon.com/DTNS. You'll get a commercial-free RSS feed that you can put in your podcast reader. You'll get special columns from Roger, updates from Sarah about her product tests, and today, an editor's desk from me about my theory about asymmetry and how if we wrap our heads around the asymmetry of interactions online, it might help us figure out how to have better social networks. It's all available on patreon.com/DTNS.
If you have feedback for us, well, guess what? We'd love to hear it. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're also live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 21:30 UTC. And you can find out more and tell a friend, maybe those 5 other friends, once you become a patron. Get it? At dailytechnewsshow.com/live.
Back on Monday with Charlotte Henry as our guest. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Nice.
That was cool.
Nailed it.
Oh, good. Yeah, you like that?
Yeah, it was really neat.
I thought it went well. I think video wise, it's a little bit weird, but content wise, I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it was seamless content wise.
Yeah, the key is
Darn near anyway.
opening it with the thing I would say coming out of this music, right? That was what I did. I was like, okay, I'm not going to write an intro. I'm just going to be like, what would I say if Eric was here? The same as I would always say.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that was smart. That was smart because you had already done the intro at the top of the show. So why do it again?
China.
That's China.
What is it good for?
That's how I started the interview. It does allow me to do fun things. China. Like that.
China.
All right. What should we call this crazy show that we had today?
We should call it
China.
That's starting to sound different.
Yeah. I'm thinking the same thing. I actually submitted a title that is boring, but it does promote what this episode is about, which is what you don't know about China tech.
Well, I think that's fine. We don't always have to be clever. We can be on the nose.
Are you eligible for the show?
Yes, I am eligible.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine if I was like,
check your credentials
allowed, Tom?
Yeah.
Get out of Showbot.
Right. Who let you in here?
Yeah, that's
who do you think
very
you are?
unethical.
We're gonna have to check your credentials, Mr. Merritt.
I was going to say though, even though I'm going to assert my executive privilege for the title, we should give some attention to some of these good cat puns and Facebook angry things. You're still Facebook, and I'm still mad. That is a great one.
We have so many Facebook titles.
Nick with a C. Hold on to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You remember that for the next time we're mad at Facebook, because it will happen again.
Sure.
Fabricated feline photo fail. Nice. Alliteration.
Alliteration. Yeah. Good work. MDTA
UK.
Yes.
You're still Facebook. So he brings bacon.
That's no cat.
That's good.
That's a good one. I'm going to go ahead and vote for that one.
Cats are harder to make than people.
I was like borderline furious this morning where I was like, I mean, who is this fooling? Like if you don't want a cat, you don't want to be a cat owner, you're not a veterinarian, like there's no reason to have I guess it would be like stock photography, but like they were all like really messed up.
I'm half expecting this to turn out to be not the same people who did this person does not exist.com.
Probably.
And it turns out that they're just running an open source TensorFlow kind of thing. And that's why it's not very good. Yeah. And that actually goes back to what Roger was saying earlier about like, maybe it's not trained on the right amount of images, but I still think like there's no excuse for it not to be.
Or maybe cats are so beautiful that we simply cannot recreate them.
You can't replicate it. Yeah.
That's probably what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably
the new Turing test. Can it create a cat?
Well, we got you don't know about what you don't know about China tech, or you're still Facebook and I'm still mad.
Hold on to your face. You're still
or
Facebook. I want to use that someday, but I think we'll go with what you don't know about China tech.
Yeah, I think given the longer than usual and very illustrious interview, that makes the most sense.
Yeah, for sure. It was actually kind of fun to not be doing the interview with Eric and be able to kind of chat along with people a little bit. While we were talking, that was fun.
You did a nice job on the interview too.
Well, thank you.
Did you edit it down at all, or is that
live to tape?
Straight, nice, very good.
Yeah. I did joke in the Discord. I was like, the only downside of this is I have to hear myself, and nobody likes hearing themselves. So.
No, I'd rather die.
I'm like, what a goofy
like an effect on your voice. Yeah.
2 days a week when I do headlines, I am like, Sarah, you are unlistenable.
Not true.
Well,
let me
I
just be that valid.
I know we all feel that way about ourselves, but it's like
so not true.
no one should ever listen to you.
Yeah,
You know, like it's very hard to like the sound of your own voice.
There've been a lot of theories and even some studies that the fact that you hear your voice through your head changes, and the dissociation of hearing it not coming through your own head is why you don't like to hear your own voice played back to you.
Which is
like an uncanny valley kind of thing.
Well, it's your jawbone when you talk. The sound actually goes through here up to your ears.
That's what I'm saying.
You know, and it's funny, this whole sort of discourse goes way back to when we all got answering machines for the first time.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Back in the early 80s. Well, I mean, when answering machines became, you know, something that you could buy. And people were like, I don't sound like that. I sound like that? Oh my gosh. And it was like this thing where like you couldn't accept your sort of outgoing message for, you know, when you weren't home and people were
because of
your
that,
messages.
We got wait for the beep. You got to leave your name. You got to leave your number. Wait for the beep. That's right. This cassette of answering machine messages available for only $19.99.
Those are the worst.
Oh, man, Tom, when you worked at the radio station, did you make your own like answering machine messages? I did that all the time.
I did, yeah. But we also had a cassette recorder when I was a kid in the early 70s because my dad was into it.
Mm-hmm.
So we all knew what we sounded like from making cassette recordings. My sister and I would do like variety shows and stuff. So the answering machine coming along was not the big reveal for us that it was sometimes for other people. But yes, taking advantage of the radio station equipment to make like a mix with some music behind it. Totally.
That's what I did. I made crazy stuff. People were so taken aback by that they never left me messages because they were like, did I get the right person? I don't know.
Yeah, this can't be Len. It was way too well produced.
It was way well produced. Hey,
it was weird. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Len.
No, I would just, we can get back to this in a second, but I was wondering, since we were talking about artificial intelligence on this show, did you guys talk about dust or sunspring on your show at all this week?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to share this in the chat room. It's an entire little short movie that was written by an algorithm.
Yeah, you know what? I saw some secondary opinion pieces flipping around about that because they were people were saying, oh, there was a philosopher who wrote a thing like nothing AI creates can be considered art because art is defined as human creation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it doesn't make any sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they just fed a bunch of stuff into an AI. I'm going to share it right now.
Oh, you are? Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, that's a big old link.
Yes. Sorry about that.
AI week.
Yeah.
Sunspring. Okay. But it was human actors.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They acted it out.
And create the guy from Silicon Valley to be in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It wrote the script?
The AI wrote the script.
Okay.
Through a bunch of science fiction, like they fed a bunch of screenplays in there, and then they gave it some prompts, and then they acted out what it gave it. It's really interesting.
They gave it scripts. Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I thought maybe this might be a fun thing since you guys were talking.
That's actually a fun thing for Sword and Laser too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it's super cool. It's fun because the actors sell it like you think you understand what they're talking about because they're acting it so well.
Right.
But it doesn't make any sense at all. It's just like predictive text, right?
Yeah.
So,
I'll have to watch this later.
Yeah, for sure. It's
only like 10 minutes long, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Less. Well, it's got my vote for Best Picture.
That's right. Certainly better than anything this year at the Oscars.
I liked The Favorite. I know Sarah differs with me on this.
I did not dislike it. I did not dislike The Favorite. I thought that it was going to be a comedy.
It wasn't your favorite.
It was with either spelling.
nor did another movie
liked
send you
the
into
movie, but
rhapsody.
I thought the movie was that when it ended, I was like, well, that was weird. I thought it was supposed to be a comedy. It just wasn't what I expected.
Right,
And I only saw it the once. So, maybe on a second view, I might feel a little bit differently. But for the most part, I'm like, nah, I don't think it deserves Best Picture. But it had great performances.
I think one of the reasons I'm still into the Oscars is because, partly because Eileen works at Rotten Tomatoes, and she's just in that world. But one of our best early memories of dating was watching the Oscars and the Golden Globes in her little like tiny one room apartment out on Ocean Beach, and so there's always just a little nostalgia of like, oh, this is something we always do. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, there was a time where, I mean, we don't live in the same city anymore or within driving distance of each other, so it's harder now. But like, my mom and I were like, we're always together on Oscar night.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
So,
it's fun, we'll have some food, have some wine, talk about the movies that we liked, even if we haven't seen them. Like it was a bonding experience.
Who do you think should win makeup and hairstyling, Len?
Oh, I think Vice for sure.
Because of the transformation.
Over The Favorite? Yeah. I mean, The Favorite, I think, is the front runner.
No, that's kind of a transformation of Christian Bale, though. I get that.
Yeah. Well, we had on
the but costume, it's sort of okay. You can make somebody look like somebody else, but the overall costume stuff is.
Yeah.
Costume is separate from makeup and hairstyling.
Yeah,
right?
it's different. Yeah, it is.
Oh, I thought it was the same.
No, which is different than special effects, visual effects. It's a different thing.
Right.
Hey, so was Roma only released on Netflix?
No, it was released in theaters. In fact, it even had a short exclusivity window of like 15 days.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And it's funny, I've watched it a few times via Netflix. I think it's a very good movie, but it's very heavy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like to the point where it's like, if people haven't seen it and they're kind of rushing to see it before the Oscars, like I'd be interested to know what the takeaway is, because this is not a feel good movie.
Right.
I mean, there are some things to draw from it for sure. It's a beautiful movie. There are some social implications that are made during this movie that are really good takeaways, but it's heavy.
I've got another question. So the Ballad of Buster Scruggs is also nominated for something.
Yeah.
And that was just released on Netflix, correct?
No, it was released in theaters as well. It just didn't have an exclusivity window. Wow. Netflix releases most of their big movies in theaters. Usually landmark theaters and indie theaters pick it up and show it so that they can qualify for the Oscars. They just don't usually give an exclusivity. But in Roma's case, they actually even gave it a short exclusive theater run.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's very, very different. I was wondering about that because I'm like, how is that? I only saw that on Netflix. How is that nominated for Academy Award?
Yeah, because they do release it in theaters, and there's only a few chains that will do it because Landmark's like, we don't care about the exclusivity window. That's fine. We'll get some butts in the seats.
Right.
Interesting.
And some indie theaters, art theaters and stuff will do that too.
Well, now you got me interested in this Roma.
It's everything Sarah just said. I really can't add anything. Like, it's great and hard.
Okay. All right. That's always good.
I'm
not afraid of movies that have a message, as long as it's
I think it's sort of like I've told a few friends recently where they're like, Oscars, and we don't pay attention. I'm like, I think it's probably gonna win, and you should watch it before Sunday if you care about that, because it's always better if like the movie that wins you have an opinion about, whether you wanted it to win or not. So
it's funny too. When I was growing up in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, my perception of the Oscars was the Hollywood elite vote for big movies, and the really good indie movies never win. And that has totally changed. Like now something like Roma, Granted, Netflix ain't no small production house, I guess, but something like Roma, I don't feel like that ever would have got a nomination. It would have been too weird, too off in the cuff, and it's not a blockbuster by any stretch, right?
Right.
I don't know. I feel like things have changed a little bit over the years. So I think that's what keeps me interested in the Oscars too, is the fact that it's like, oh, you know what? There's really like good stuff being nominated. I want to see a lot of these movies.
I only just watched Room like about a week and a half ago. I had no idea that it was even like a nominated film. Like, because I was like, because following up on Captain Marvel, let's say Brie Larson won a Best Actress for what? And then I saw it was Room. So
Room.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched
Another heavy one.
I really like weird movies like that.
Yeah. I thought
I really liked it.
It was great, and she deserved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
it was like,
I didn't even know
by
it
the end of
existed.
that movie, I was like, I need some ice cream.
Yeah, right.
I think they handled it really well too.
Thumb in my mouth, like, wow. Yeah.
Well, we like watching a lot of like true crime stuff. And so it's sort of like that, had that feel, but a much better story, I guess. I don't know. It was really cool. Liked it.
Yeah, I mean, Black Panther got a Best Picture nomination. That's a blockbuster.
Yeah.
Black Klansman got a nomination. Not a blockbuster. Bohemian Rhapsody, yeah, arguably a blockbuster type movie. The Favorite, definitely not. Green Book, not. Roma, not. Stars Born, yeah. Vice, not. So it's an interesting mix. And then looking at genres too, you've got, superhero, music, weird experimental, Spike Lee, like Alfonso Cuarón. It's a good mix.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, after La La Land lost to Moonlight in that very strange moment in Oscar history, which was 2 years ago, right? Yeah, 2 years ago. It was 2017. I mean, at this point, I'm like, all right, we don't know what we're doing. We don't even have an Oscar host. Like, no one really knows what's going on here, but we know that there are a certain amount of people, industry people, and also people who just enjoy film and cinema and the craft of it, who, care about this whole thing. I will be watching on Sunday with pizza in hand.
Well, folks, we hope you also will have pizza in hand, whatever you're doing, and the flavor you want. Video folks, thanks for hanging around and watching us do an audio podcast. And audio folks, stick around. There's more to come.